Welcome to Silent Queen's Reckoning. I'm so glad you could join us today. Now let's dive right into the story.
Chapter 1. 11 minutes after the doctor told Amelia Rowe she had cancer, her husband asked for a divorce in the hospital parking garage. The paper folder was still warm from Amelia's hands. Inside it were test results, appointment notes, and a treatment plan written in calm black ink, as if calm ink could make terrifying words easier to carry. Her knees were weak beneath her beige coat. The fluorescent lights above the parking level hummed with a cold insect sound. Somewhere nearby, a car alarm chirped once and went silent. Daniel Rowe did not touch her shoulder. He stood beside their black sedan with one hand in his pocket and the other gripping his phone. He looked handsome in the polished way he always did after a morning of being admired. Navy suit, silver watch, hair cleanly combed, face arranged into concern from a distance. But his eyes kept sliding toward the exit ramp, as if the garage itself embarrassed him. Amelia had just heard the word malignant. Daniel looked at his watch. "This is not the right time," he said, "but I cannot keep pretending." At first, Amelia did not understand. Her mind was still upstairs in the consultation room, still watching Dr. Mercer fold her hands and speak gently, still hearing phrases that seemed to belong to someone else's life. "Early enough to fight. More tests needed. We move quickly. You are not alone. You are not alone." The sentence had followed Amelia into the elevator like a small lamp. Then Daniel blew it out. "Pretending what?" Amelia asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin and careful. She held the folder against her chest, as if paper could keep her body from splitting open. Daniel looked around the garage. 2 nurses walked toward a compact car 3 rows away. A man pushed an empty wheelchair toward the entrance. Daniel lowered his voice. "That this marriage is working." The words settled between them, absurd and precise. Amelia stared at him. She could still feel the doctor's chair beneath her, the paper sheet beneath her palm, the small moment when Daniel had looked down at his phone during the diagnosis instead of looking at her. She had thought he was afraid. She had even felt sorry for him. "Daniel," she said slowly, "I was diagnosed 11 minutes ago." His jaw tightened. "That is exactly why I have to be honest now. I cannot be trapped by guilt." Trapped. The word moved through her like cold water. A door opened somewhere in the garage. Footsteps echoed. Daniel stepped closer, not to comfort her, but to make sure no one else heard. "Vivian is pregnant," he said. For a moment, the humming lights disappeared. Amelia's body remained upright, but something inside her lost the shape of the world. Vivian Hale, Daniel's chief of staff. The woman who sent him midnight schedule changes, who laughed too loudly at board dinners, who once touched Amelia's scarf and said she admired women who could disappear into elegance. Pregnant. Daniel continued, faster now, as if speed could make cruelty efficient. "It happened during a difficult period. I did not plan it, but she needs stability, and I need a life that is not built around illness." Amelia looked at him then, really looked. His face did not show grief. It showed irritation. He was annoyed that her cancer had arrived at an inconvenient time for his confession. Annoyed that her body had complicated his clean exit. Annoyed that if he left too late, people might call him a monster. So he was leaving early, before sympathy could attach itself to her. The absurdity almost made her laugh. "A life not built around illness," she repeated. "You know what I mean." She did. That was the worst part. Daniel had built his entire public image around compassion. He was the golden founder of Rovita Health, the man who raised money for cancer patients, hosted charity dinners, gave interviews about dignity and treatment, and stood beside Amelia on gala stages while calling her his quiet strength. He knew how to say all the right words under warm lighting. In a parking garage, after 11 minutes, he knew none of them. Amelia's fingers tightened on the folder. The edge pressed into her palm. "Does Vivian know?" she asked. Daniel blinked. "Know what?" "That the clinic upstairs exists because of my family's foundation." His face changed so quickly that even in the harsh garage light, she saw it. Panic first, then anger, then the familiar mask of control. "Do not make this about money," he said. Amelia's mouth softened, not into a smile, but into something colder. Daniel hated when she mentioned money. Not because he disliked money. He loved money, applause, influence, and donor walls with his name near the top. He hated being reminded that the first bridge to all of it had been Amelia's late mother's foundation, Amelia's family introductions, Amelia's quiet checks signed through offices Daniel never visited unless cameras were present. Rovita Health looked like Daniel's empire. Its first funding had come from Amelia. The Oncology Comfort Center, where she had just received her diagnosis, had been renovated by Amelia's family foundation in her mother's name. Daniel had stood at the opening ceremony, hand on his heart, speaking about hope. He had not mentioned that his wife's inheritance had paid for the rooms where frightened people learned how to keep breathing. Amelia had allowed the omission because she believed generosity did not need applause. Daniel had mistaken that belief for blindness. His phone buzzed. He glanced down before he could stop himself. Amelia saw the name on the Vivian. The message preview was short. "Did you tell her yet?" Amelia looked back at Daniel. He slipped the phone into his pocket. "I am trying to do this respectfully." Something inside Amelia went still. Respectfully. In a garage, 11 minutes after cancer. With his pregnant mistress waiting for confirmation. She did not cry. Not there. Not for him. She opened her purse, removed her car key from the shared ring, and placed the rest of the keys on the hood of the sedan. The tiny metal sound echoed. Daniel frowned. "What are you doing?" "Taking the next elevator," she said. "Amelia, do not be dramatic." She lifted the medical folder, her eyes steady on his. "You asked for divorce 11 minutes after my diagnosis because you did not want to be trapped by guilt. I am saving you the trouble of pretending." He reached for her wrist. She stepped back before he touched her. The motion was small. The decision was not. Amelia turned and walked toward the elevators. Her legs shook. Her vision blurred once, but she kept moving. Behind her, Daniel called her name in a low, angry whisper, the kind he used when he feared an audience more than harm. She did not turn. At the elevator doors, Amelia saw her reflection in the brushed metal. Pale face. Dark hair tucked behind one ear. Coat buttoned wrong. A woman holding a cancer folder like a verdict. The elevator opened. She stepped inside alone. Before the doors closed, she took out her phone and called the one person Daniel had always dismissed as merely her mother's old assistant. When Margaret Vale answered, Amelia spoke with a steadiness that surprised even her. "Margaret, I need the foundation files on Rovita and the clinic. All of them." There was a pause, then the soft sound of a chair moving. "Today?" Margaret asked. Amelia looked at the medical folder in her hand. Now, Chapter 2. The elevator rose slowly, floor by floor, while Amelia stood under white light and let the first wave of shock pass through her body without giving it her knees. The folder in her arms felt heavier than it should have. Diagnosis, treatment, divorce, mistress, pregnancy. Each word knocked against the next until none of them seemed possible inside one morning. At the lobby level, the doors opened to a wall of gentle hospital noise. A volunteer pushing flowers, a child in a knitted hat, a woman crying quietly near the information desk while an older man rubbed circles across her back. The world had not paused for Amelia's disaster. That almost comforted her. Pain was not special enough to stop the day. She walked to a quiet corner near the donor wall. Her mother's name was there in brushed gold, Eleanor Wren Foundation. Below it, smaller letters honored the renovation of the Patient Comfort Center. Amelia had passed that wall many times beside Daniel. He always angled his body so photographs captured his profile and the word compassion behind him. He never stood close enough for the full foundation name to show. Amelia touched the edge of the wall with 2 fingers. Her mother had died when Amelia was 23, not from cancer, but from a sudden heart condition that left no time for long goodbyes. Eleanor Wren had been quiet, stubborn, and impossible to impress. She believed money was useful only when it protected people who had no strength left for paperwork, publicity, or pride. After her death, Amelia inherited the foundation and a private share of several health projects. She had never wanted to be the public face. She preferred making things happen and letting other people clap for the outcome. Daniel had loved that about her at first. Then he had used it. When they married, Rovita was a polished idea with no spine. Daniel had charisma, a slide deck, and a way of making older investors feel modern. Amelia had the bridge: family trust contacts, hospital board relationships, donor credibility, and the foundation funds that made his first pilot program possible. She never asked him to put her name in interviews. She never corrected articles calling him self-made. She told herself love did not keep score. But Daniel did. He simply kept the score differently. Every gift from Amelia became proof of his talent for attracting support. Every room she opened became a room he conquered. Every silence she offered became space for him to rewrite the past. Her phone buzzed. Margaret had sent the first file summary already. Amelia did not open it yet. Her hands were too cold. Another message appeared from Daniel. Please do not do anything impulsive. Amelia stared at the screen. Impulsive. 11 minutes after a cancer diagnosis, he had asked for divorce in a parking garage. Now he worried she might be impulsive. A second message. We need to control the narrative before people misunderstand. There it was. Narrative. Daniel's real religion. Amelia turned the phone face down on her palm and closed her eyes. She needed to go home. Not their penthouse. Not the glass apartment Daniel loved because clients admired the skyline. Home meant the brownstone on Ashford Street, left to Amelia by her mother, where Daniel stayed only when he wanted photographs that suggested old money and domestic warmth. It had a small garden, worn wooden floors, and a study full of Eleanor's books. It was the only place Amelia wanted to fall apart. She booked a car and waited near the entrance. Outside, rain had begun. Thin, cold, almost invisible. She watched people pull up hoods and hurry to vehicles. Her body felt unfamiliar. Not only because of the diagnosis, but because illness had arrived and found betrayal already seated at the table. She wondered, with a strange flatness, whether Daniel had hoped the diagnosis would be worse. Bad enough to pity publicly. Not so bad that she could fight. The thought made her stomach twist. The car arrived. Amelia stepped in and sat very still while the hospital fell behind her. On the ride, Vivian called once. Amelia did not answer. Then a message arrived. I am sorry you had to find out today. Daniel has been under so much pressure. Amelia looked at that sentence until the rain outside blurred into gray lines. Sorry you had to find out today. Not sorry for the affair. Not sorry for the pregnancy. Not sorry that a woman with a fresh cancer diagnosis had been abandoned in a garage. Sorry for the timing, as if cruelty were acceptable with better scheduling. Amelia saved the message. At the brownstone, she let herself in with trembling hands. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. Her mother's blue umbrella still stood in the brass holder near the door, though Amelia had not used it in years. She took off her wet coat and hung it carefully because doing one ordinary thing correctly kept her from sliding to the floor. Then she went upstairs to the study, closed the door, and opened Margaret's files. The facts were plain. The clinic Daniel liked to call his flagship compassion project had been funded through Eleanor Wren Foundation grants. Rovita's first patient support program used foundation staff, foundation contacts, and a building lease secured by Amelia's family office. Daniel's company had permission to operate programs under the clinic brand as long as patient services remained protected, costs transparent, and public materials accurate. Public materials accurate. Amelia almost laughed. Daniel had spent years letting the world believe the clinic was proof of his personal generosity. Now he had asked for divorce before she had even learned how many treatments she would need. Her phone rang. Margaret. Amelia answered. Margaret's voice was calm, older, and steady enough to lean on without shame. She asked no dramatic questions. She did not demand details. She simply said, I have gathered the documents. You should rest first. The kindness nearly broke Amelia. Her throat tightened. She pressed her fingers against her eyes until the sting passed. Rest later, she said. Margaret paused, then adjusted. That was why Amelia trusted her. She did not waste comfort where action had been requested. Within an hour, the study table held a clear path. Not revenge. Protection. The patient programs had to continue. The clinic staff had to remain untouched. The foundation's name had to be separated from Daniel's lies. Rovita's access to the clinic's public spaces, donor lists, and foundation-backed patient stories could be frozen without harming current patients. Daniel's company would lose the soft glow it had borrowed, but the people receiving treatment would not lose care. Amelia read each step with a strange calm. This was the first rule of her new life. No innocent person would pay for Daniel's cruelty. The second rule was simpler. Daniel would never again use her mother's work as his costume. At 6, Daniel sent another message. Vivian is scared. Please do not attack her. Amelia stood by the study window, looking down at the wet street. A woman walked past holding a paper bag over her head against the rain. Amelia's reflection hovered faintly in the glass, pale but upright. Vivian was scared. Amelia had cancer. Daniel still thought the room should rearrange around his mistress. She wrote no answer. Instead, she opened a new document and titled it, Public Boundaries. The first line was not emotional. It was clean. Effective immediately, Eleanor Wren Foundation will review all public uses of its name, facilities, and patient support stories connected to Roe Vita Health. Amelia stared at the sentence. Then, she deleted all but the truth people could understand. The foundation will protect the clinic, the patients, and the work. It will no longer protect Daniel Roe's image. That was better. Chapter 3. Daniel returned to the penthouse that night and found Amelia's closet half empty. She knew because he called 14 times in 20 minutes. When she did not answer, he sent a photo of the open closet as if documenting a crime. Her silk blouses were gone. Her medical folder was gone. Her mother's pearl earrings, which Daniel liked her to wear at galas, were gone. The apartment still looked expensive, but without Amelia's quiet belongings, it looked less like a home and more like a hotel room waiting for a man who admired his own reflection. At 8:30, he arrived at the brownstone. Amelia watched him from the upstairs window before he saw her. He stood under the porch light in the rain, one hand on the brass knocker, jaw set with controlled anger. Vivian was not with him. Daniel was too careful for that. He still believed damage could be managed if it arrived in the right suit and used the right tone. Margaret was in the parlor with a stack of files. She looked up when the knock came. Amelia gave a small shake of her head. Margaret did not move. Daniel knocked again. Then he used his key. It did not work. Amelia had not changed the lock for drama. She had changed it because Daniel had once given Vivian access to the penthouse for work emergencies without asking, and Amelia had learned in a single morning that politeness was not security. The brownstone was hers, and illness had made clarity feel urgent. Daniel looked down at the key, then up at the door. For a moment, Amelia remembered another woman in another story might have rushed to open it, desperate to prove she was not cruel. Amelia did not. She stood behind the upstairs curtain and let him experience the smallest possible version of what he had done. A door that no longer obeyed him. He called again. This time, she answered. "Open the door," he said. Amelia looked at the rain moving across the glass. "No, this is my wife's house. It is Eleanor Wren's house, then mine." His silence sharpened. "You are acting out." There it was. The phrase men use when a woman stops behaving conveniently but has not yet given them a better accusation. "Go home, Daniel. We need to discuss the foundation before you embarrass yourself." Amelia's hand tightened around the phone. She could feel the fatigue under her bones now, deep and spreading. Cancer sat in the background of every breath, waiting. But fatigue was not surrender. "You asked for divorce in a parking garage," she said. "You do not get to enter my mother's house to discuss embarrassment." Daniel looked up then, and she knew he had found her silhouette behind the curtain. His face changed. For a second, he looked genuinely alarmed, not for her, but because he understood she was not alone in the house and not emotionally wandering. She was watching. She was choosing. "Amelia," he said, softer, "I handled today badly." Handled. Badly. As if he had dropped a glass. "Good night," she said. She ended the call. Daniel remained on the porch for 4 minutes. Then he left. In the parlor, Margaret placed one file on top of the stack. She did not comment on the locked door. She only pointed to a highlighted paragraph. The foundation could call an emergency review of public partnership materials by morning. The clinic director, Dr. Mercer, already knew enough to cooperate. Patient appointments would continue. Daniel's scheduled charity appearance the following evening could be altered without disrupting the fundraiser. That fundraiser was the center of his week. The Hope in Motion dinner, 300 donors, press, a short film about patient care. Daniel was supposed to receive an award for leadership in compassionate health innovation. Vivian had organized the guest list. Amelia was expected to sit beside him in a silver dress and smile for photographs, quiet proof that his personal life remained as polished as his public language. Amelia touched the edge of the program mock-up. Daniel had asked for divorce in the garage because he wanted to clear space for Vivian before Amelia's illness could complicate the picture. He did not expect Amelia to appear at the dinner. He likely expected a statement about medical privacy and mutual respect. He would stand under warm lights, accept an award, perhaps speak tenderly about supporting families in difficult moments while his wife recovered somewhere off stage and his pregnant mistress watched from the front table. The image was so ugly that it clarified the next step. "I will attend tomorrow," Amelia said. Margaret looked at her carefully. "Are you sure?" Amelia was not sure of many things. Not of treatment, not of her body, not of whether she would wake at 3 a.m. terrified by words printed in a medical folder. But she was sure Daniel would use her absence as permission. "Yes," she said. The next morning, Amelia slept until 10, then woke with a headache and the sour taste of fear in her mouth. For several seconds, she forgot. Then the diagnosis returned. The garage returned. Daniel's face returned. Vivian's message returned. She curled on her side and pressed one hand to her chest until the panic eased. She allowed herself 10 minutes to be afraid. Not elegant, not strong, afraid. Then she showered, dressed in soft black trousers and a cream sweater, and called Dr. Mercer's office to confirm the next appointment. She wrote down the time. She asked no heroic questions. She did not search the internet until terror could multiply. She would handle one step at a time because bodies, unlike reputations, cannot be bullied into compliance. At noon, a courier delivered a garment bag from the penthouse. Daniel had sent the silver dress. A note was pinned to the hanger. "Please wear this tonight. We should look united." Amelia read it once, then placed the dress back in the bag. She did not tear it. She did not throw it down the stairs. She simply chose another dress from her mother's cedar wardrobe. Deep green, long-sleeved, simple, and impossible to mistake for Daniel's styling. At 4, Vivian called from an unknown number. Amelia let it go to voicemail. The message was breathy, controlled, almost sweet. "Amelia, I know this is painful, but Daniel and I are trying to do things with dignity. Tonight matters to patients. Please do not turn it into something personal." Something personal. Amelia saved the voicemail. Then she looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. She pinned her mother's small gold brooch to the dress. It was shaped like a door knocker, a family joke from years ago because Eleanor Wren believed women should always have their own door and the right to open it or close it. Amelia touched the brooch once. "All right, Mom," she whispered. Then she left for the dinner. Chapter 4. The Hope in Motion dinner took place in a glass ballroom above the river. The kind of room designed to make donors feel generous before dessert. Gold lights glowed over white tables. Flowers spilled from tall vases. A wall-sized screen displayed Daniel's face beside words like vision, courage, and care. Amelia paused at the entrance and let the irony wash over her without moving her expression. Daniel saw her before Vivian did. His smile tightened, but he recovered quickly. He walked toward Amelia with both hands slightly extended, a man performing relief. Cameras were nearby. He knew exactly how far gestures carried. "You came," he said. Amelia looked at his hands. He lowered them. "I was invited," she said. His eyes flicked over her dress, then the brooch, then her face. "Where is the silver dress?" "Somewhere it can look united by itself." His jaw moved. A photographer approached, lifting a camera. Daniel leaned in, trying to create the picture anyway. Amelia turned slightly so the camera captured them apart, not together. The flash went off. Daniel's smile held. His eyes did not. Vivian arrived in a pale blue gown that draped gently over her still small pregnancy. She looked beautiful, polished, and frightened enough to resent Amelia for noticing. Her hand rested on her stomach with careful timing. Not too obvious, just enough for those who knew to understand she was not merely an employee anymore. Amelia looked at the hand, then at Vivian's face. She said nothing. Vivian seemed prepared for accusation. Silence unsettled her. The seating chart delivered the next insult. Amelia had been moved from Daniel's right side to the second table, near a pillar and 3 minor sponsors. Vivian's name card sat beside Daniel's. It was an old trick in a new room. Reduce the wife quietly, elevate the mistress politely. Let the room absorb the change before it has language for it. Amelia picked up her name card from the second table. Daniel was beside her in 2 strides. Do not. She looked at him. Do not what? Make people uncomfortable. The sentence was almost funny. He had asked for divorce after her diagnosis. He had brought his pregnant mistress to a patient fundraiser. He had placed Amelia by a pillar at an event built on her foundation's support. Yet discomfort, in Daniel's mind, began only when the person humiliated declined to sit quietly. Amelia carried the name card to the central table and placed it next to her water glass. She did not move Vivian's card. She did not need to. The table watched in silence as Amelia sat in the seat reserved by history, funding, and truth, not by Daniel's convenience. Vivian stood behind the chair, frozen. Daniel leaned close. This is not the place. Amelia adjusted her napkin in her lap. You chose a parking garage. I choose this table. The sponsor across from her lowered his eyes, but not before Amelia saw his mouth tighten with recognition. The dinner began with violin music and carefully plated salads. Daniel spoke to donors on either side of him, laughing at the right moments, but his hand remained stiff around his glass. Vivian sat 1 seat away after a staff member quietly added another chair. She touched her stomach twice, perhaps for comfort, perhaps for strategy. Amelia ate 3 bites because she knew her body needed food, even if fear had closed her appetite. The first speaker praised Daniel as a man who understood what families endure after devastating diagnoses. Amelia placed her fork down. The second speaker mentioned Rovita's compassionate leadership. Amelia looked at the screen where Daniel's profile glowed. The third speaker introduced a short film. It showed patients entering the comfort center, nurses placing blankets, volunteers arranging tea, soft rooms where families could breathe. Amelia recognized every corner. Her mother's foundation had chosen the colors. Amelia had approved the chairs because her mother once said frightened people should never be forced to sit in hard seats. Daniel appeared in 2 clips, smiling in a hallway, shaking hands, accepting gratitude that had been redirected toward him like light through glass. At the end of the film, the screen faded to Daniel's name. Applause rose. Daniel stood. He looked relieved now, reassured by sound. Applause had always steadied him more than conscience. He walked to the stage, buttoned his jacket, and accepted the award with a practiced bow of his head. Vivian watched with shining eyes. Amelia watched his shoes. They were perfectly polished. He had stood in the garage in those shoes while telling his wife he needed a life not built around illness. Daniel began his speech. He spoke about dignity. He spoke about carrying families through fear. He spoke about how illness tests the bonds of love. The room softened around him. People wanted to believe handsome men with good lighting. It made generosity feel orderly. Then the screen behind him changed. Not abruptly, not with scandalous photos, not with private messages. Amelia had no interest in making her diagnosis or Vivian's pregnancy into public entertainment. The slide simply replaced Daniel's portrait with the donor wall from the clinic lobby. Eleanor Wren Foundation. Renovated in memory of Eleanor Wren. Patient comfort program funded and protected by the foundation. The room quieted. Daniel turned slightly, confused. The next slide showed the original opening ceremony photograph. Daniel stood at the center, smiling. Amelia stood 3 people away, quiet in a navy dress. Beneath it was a caption that did not accuse. It clarified. The clinic was built through Eleanor Wren Foundation support before Rovita's public partnership began. Daniel's face drained of color. The third slide appeared. Patient services remain fully protected. Public use of foundation materials by Rovita is under review. Plain words. No dense professional language. No attack on patients. No mention of divorce, cancer, or parking garages. Just the truth, removing Daniel from the center without harming anyone else. Amelia rose from the central table. Every face turned toward her. She did not walk to the stage. She stood where she was, one hand resting lightly on the table, her mother's brooch catching the light. Her body felt weak, but her voice did not. This work will continue, she said. The patients will not lose care because someone confused compassion with branding. No one breathed for a second. Daniel gripped the sides of the podium. Amelia. Her name in his mouth carried the same warning as it had in the garage. Stop. Do not expose me. Protect the picture. She looked at him with a calm so complete it felt almost separate from her body. No, she said, one word. The whole ballroom heard it. Vivian's hand fell from her stomach. She looked at Daniel as if expecting him to control the room. For the first time, He could not. The screen behind him continued to show the foundation name. The award in his hand looked heavier by the second. A donor near the back began clapping, then another. The applause was not for Daniel this time. It moved around him and past him, toward the woman he had seated by a pillar and the foundation he had treated as scenery. Amelia did not smile. Victory, at that moment, was not sweet. It was clean. Daniel stood under the lights and learned what it felt like to be visible without being believed. Chapter 5. The story did not break open that night because Amelia did not feed it enough spectacle. That was deliberate. People wanted the kind of scandal they could consume quickly. Wife with cancer, husband with pregnant mistress, public gala disaster. Amelia gave them something sharper and harder to twist, a correction. By morning, the headlines focused on the foundation review, the donor clarification, and Daniel's charity award being overshadowed by questions about who had really built the clinic program. A few outlets hinted at personal tension. None had enough to print the garage. Amelia had kept that for herself, not because she feared truth, but because not every wound deserves to become public property on the first day it bleeds. Daniel called at 7. Amelia was sitting at her mother's kitchen table eating toast she could barely taste. Her next appointment was at 9. The medical folder lay beside a notebook where she had written questions in plain language. What happens first? Who comes with me? How tired will I be? Can I keep working? She had underlined one question twice. What support do I need at home? Daniel's name lit the phone screen. She let it ring. He left a voicemail. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I was trying to honor patience, and you turned it into a power play. Vivian is terrified. The stress is not good for her. We need to speak before this becomes worse. Amelia listened once, then she saved it. At 8, Vivian sent a message. I hope you are proud. You made a pregnant woman feel unsafe. Amelia looked at the words and felt something colder than anger. Vivian had stood at a gala beside the man who abandoned his wife after cancer, wearing a gown chosen for sympathy, benefiting from a stolen place at the central table. Now she wanted the language of safety. Amelia did not answer. Her own body had become a place of uncertainty. She would not spend its limited strength soothing the woman who had helped Daniel turn illness into a timing problem. At the hospital, Dr. Mercer greeted her with the same gentle steadiness as before. Amelia almost broke when she saw it. There are people who meet fear without trying to own it. Dr. Mercer was one of them. She reviewed the next steps carefully, without flooding Amelia with language that made her feel stupid. More scans, a treatment schedule, a team, decisions made one at a time. When Dr. Mercer asked whether Amelia had support at home, Amelia looked at the floor for one breath too long. I have Margaret, she said, and myself. Dr. Mercer did not press. She only nodded and wrote something down. After the appointment, Amelia walked again past the donor wall. This time, 2 staff members nearby recognized her from the dinner. One looked as if she wanted to say something, then wisely did not. Amelia appreciated that more than sympathy. She did not need everyone turning her diagnosis into soft voices and tilted heads. She needed the work to continue and her treatment to begin. In the afternoon, Margaret arrived at the brownstone with soup, folders, and a list. The list was titled, Things Daniel Cannot Touch. Amelia laughed for the first time in 2 days. The sound startled her. It came out small and rusty, but real. They spent an hour sorting immediate boundaries. Daniel's access to the brownstone was removed. Foundation communications would go through Margaret. Roe Vita materials using the clinic's name would be paused. Amelia's personal medical information would remain private. If Daniel or Vivian hinted publicly that Amelia was unstable or vindictive, the Foundation would release the clean timeline of support and partnership history. No speeches, no jargon, simple doors. At 4, Daniel appeared on a business news segment. Amelia did not watch live. Margaret did, then summarized. Daniel looked tired but composed. He praised the Foundation, said transitions could be emotional, and insisted that his focus remained patience. He did not mention Amelia by name, but referred to private family matters with a practiced expression of sorrow. By 5, a clip circulated of Daniel saying, when illness enters a marriage, everyone suffers in different ways. Amelia watched that clip. Once. The sentence was designed to make him look burdened by her diagnosis without admitting he had left her in the garage. It was elegant in the way poisonous things can be elegant. She opened her phone and called Margaret. Release the parking garage timeline, Amelia said. Margaret was silent for half a second. The full details? No, Not my diagnosis. Not Vivian's pregnancy. Just the sequence. Within an hour, the Foundation's public account posted a short statement from Amelia. Yesterday morning, I received serious medical news. 11 minutes later, in the hospital parking garage, my husband chose to discuss ending our marriage. That private pain is not the Foundation's business. What is the Foundation's business is that patient care must never be used to polish the image of people who abandon compassion when cameras are gone. The statement ended there. No dramatic adjectives. No insults. No mention of cancer. No mistress. Enough truth to make Daniel's sentence collapse under its own weight. The response was immediate. People understood parking garage. They understood 11 minutes. They understood the difference between a man speaking about illness under studio lights and a man ending a marriage beside a hospital elevator while his wife held medical papers. They did not need the diagnosis name to feel the cruelty. Daniel called 17 times. Amelia turned off her phone. That evening, she sat in the parlor while rain tapped against the windows, eating soup Margaret had warmed for her. The world outside was beginning to turn its gaze toward Daniel, but inside the brownstone, there was only a spoon, a blanket, and the frightening map of treatment ahead. Amelia did not feel powerful. She felt ill, betrayed, and exhausted, but she also felt something Daniel had not expected. Free from protecting him. Chapter 6. Vivian tried to save Daniel by making herself smaller in public and larger in private. For 2 days, she vanished from photographs. Her professional profile lost the Rosita header. Her social accounts became private. Then, through mutual contacts, soft rumors began to move. Vivian had been misled. Vivian believed the marriage was over. Vivian was pregnant and scared. Vivian had asked Daniel to handle things kindly. Vivian never wanted a public fight with a sick woman. Amelia heard the rumors from 3 people by lunch. She did not chase them. Rumors are bait. If a wounded woman runs after every whisper, she spends her strength proving she deserves basic decency. Amelia needed that strength for blood tests, scans, and the strange new calendar of treatment days marked in blue ink. Still, Vivian made one mistake. She sent Amelia a long email. It began with regret and ended with accusation. In between, Vivian explained that Daniel had been lonely for years, that Amelia's quietness made him feel invisible, that success placed unbearable pressure on men, that pregnancy changed everything, and that Amelia's public statement had made Vivian fear for her unborn child. The email was polished enough to have been edited by Daniel. It used words like grace, privacy, and compassion, as if those words had not been emptied by their behavior. Amelia read it in bed after her first treatment planning appointment. Her body felt heavy with fatigue. A bruise darkened the inside of her arm from blood work. The house was quiet. For a moment, Vivian's sentences blurred into the old reflex. Explain, soothe, prove she was not cruel. Then Amelia reached the final line. I hope you will not punish an innocent baby because you are hurt. That did it. Amelia sat up slowly. The room tilted, then steadied. She placed the laptop on the blanket and opened a fresh reply. She wrote only 3 sentences. Your child is not responsible for your choices. My illness is not responsible for Daniel's choices. Do not contact me again unless it concerns a matter that legally requires my response. She sent it. Then she forwarded Vivian's email to Margaret. The next morning, Daniel announced he was stepping back from public appearances to focus on family. The word family arrived in his statement like a stolen coat. He meant Vivian and the baby. He meant the image of sacrifice. He did not mean the wife whose medical folder had been in her hands when he chose his new life. Rosita's partners were less moved than he hoped. The Foundation review had exposed a simple truth. Daniel's company had borrowed credibility from patient spaces it did not build. Donors became cautious. Hospitals asked direct questions. A planned campaign featuring Daniel walking through the clinic was canceled. The footage existed, but no one wanted to use it now. A handsome man saying compassionate care begins with presence looked different after the phrase 11 minutes entered the public memory. Amelia watched from a distance and kept her days organized around survival. Morning medication, notes from Dr. Mercer, short walks when she could manage them, soup, rest, Foundation calls, limited to 30 minutes. No doom scrolling after 9, no answering Daniel, no reading comments alone. These rules sounded small. They saved her. On the 3rd week, Her hair had not yet begun to change, but she found herself touching it often, anticipating loss before it arrived. She hated that vanity still existed inside fear. Then she stopped hating it. The body is not shallow for wanting to recognize itself. Margaret came over with scarves, without making it an event. She placed them on the sofa, made tea, and said nothing sentimental. Amelia picked one up, dark blue with tiny gold dots, and laughed again because it looked exactly like something her mother would have bought while pretending it was practical. That afternoon, Daniel came to the clinic. He did not know Amelia was there. Or perhaps he did, and thought the setting would give him advantage. The clinic lobby was busy with patients, families, volunteers, and staff who had become very good at pretending not to recognize public tension. Amelia had just finished a consultation and was standing near the elevator with Margaret when Daniel entered in a dark coat, followed by 2 board members and a photographer. The photographer lifted his camera. Amelia understood immediately. Daniel was trying to take back the image, not with apology, with pictures, a visit to the clinic, serious face, hands folded, maybe a statement about ongoing commitment. He wanted the room to make him look compassionate again. The clinic director saw Amelia. She did not speak. She simply walked to the photographer and lowered one hand gently over the lens. The gesture was small, almost maternal. It stopped the entire performance. Daniel looked across the lobby and saw Amelia. For once, he had no prepared face. She wore a soft, gray coat, her medical bracelet still on her wrist, her blue scarf loose around her neck. She looked tired. She looked ill. She also looked like the person whose foundation name was on the wall behind him. The lobby quieted in patches. Daniel walked toward her. "I did not know you would be here." Amelia's eyes moved to the photographer. "Clearly." The board members looked away. He lowered his voice. "I am trying to repair damage." "No," Amelia said. "You are trying to photograph repair." The sentence was not loud. It traveled anyway. Daniel's face reddened. The photographer lowered the camera fully. A woman seated nearby, wearing a knit cap and holding a thermos, watched Daniel with open dislike. That look seemed to wound him more than Amelia's words. He could dismiss a wife. He did not know what to do with patients who no longer wanted him as scenery. Amelia stepped closer to the donor wall. Her voice remained even. "The clinic is not your stage." That became the line people remembered, though no official camera captured it. Someone in the lobby posted it later without video, just the sentence. It spread because it explained Daniel better than any long article had. By evening, Rovita announced Daniel would be taking an indefinite leave from all patient-facing work. Amelia read the announcement while lying on the sofa under a blanket, too tired to feel triumphant. Margaret was in the kitchen washing mugs. Rain brushed the windows. The blue scarf lay across the armrest beside her. The world kept asking whether she felt vindicated. She did not. She felt alive. For now, that was enough. Chapter 7. Treatment changed Amelia's relationship with time. Before, days had been divided by meetings, dinners, foundation calls, Daniel's schedule, public events, and the invisible labor of making a marriage look smoother than it felt. Now time came in smaller units. The hour before an appointment, the cold minutes in a waiting room, the afternoon after fatigue settled into her bones, the nights when fear sat at the end of the bed and refused to leave. Daniel had once called her quietness elegant. Illness revealed that quietness was sometimes just concentration. Concentration on getting through nausea. Concentration on answering one email without crying. Concentration on walking from the bed to the bathroom and back without feeling betrayed by her own legs. She did not turn cancer into a lesson. She hated when people tried. Pain is not automatically noble. Fear does not become beautiful because someone writes a good sentence about it. There were mornings Amelia woke furious that her body required courage before breakfast. There were afternoons she resented every pink ribbon, every soft slogan, every person who told her she was a warrior when she wanted only to be a woman with clean sheets and no appointments. But she kept going. The foundation work became narrower and more honest. Amelia reduced events. She cut vanity campaigns. She redirected money toward transport, meals, childcare, and quiet rooms where families could sit without being photographed. If a donor wanted their name on a wall, fine. If a donor wanted a camera in a patient's face, no. The word no became easier with practice. One morning, Margaret placed a report on Amelia's desk. Rovita's board had removed Daniel from operational control of all foundation-linked programs. Vivian had resigned quietly. Daniel's award from Hope in Motion had been returned by mutual agreement, a phrase so bland that Amelia almost smiled. Public shame often dresses itself in beige language when men can afford good advisors. The most important part was at the bottom. Patient services continued without interruption. Amelia read that line twice. That was the victory. Not Daniel losing applause, not Vivian retreating from public view, not strangers calling Amelia strong. The victory was that a woman receiving treatment could still find tea in the comfort room, a ride home after an appointment, a blanket that did not smell like fear. Daniel had tried to make compassion into a brand. Amelia made sure it remained a place people could enter. At the end of the second month, Daniel requested a private meeting. Amelia refused. He requested mediation. She agreed, but only with representatives present and no discussion of her medical details. They met in a plain office downtown. Daniel arrived looking thinner, his expensive suit hanging differently. Vivian was not there. Amelia wore a black sweater, gray trousers, and the blue scarf. Her face had changed. Treatment had sharpened it. Fatigue had hollowed the space beneath her cheekbones. But her eyes had become steadier, not softer. Daniel looked at her as if the sight hurt him. "I did not understand what I was doing," he said. Amelia looked down at the table. A year earlier, she might have explained. She might have tried to help him understand himself. Now she knew some men call their choices confusion because confusion sounds less ugly than selfishness. "You understood enough to wait until we were away from the doctor," she said. His face tightened. The representative shifted papers. No one rushed to fill the silence. Daniel tried again. "Vivian and I are no longer together." Amelia felt nothing dramatic. No surge of satisfaction. No pity. Only a faint recognition of a pattern completing itself. Daniel had abandoned his wife for a woman who admired his borrowed light. Then, when the light moved, the romance did too. "That is not relevant to me," she said. He looked wounded by the truth that his personal collapse no longer had central placement in her life. The mediation stayed simple. The marriage would end. Daniel would keep what was his. Amelia would keep what had always been hers. The brownstone. The foundation. Her mother's assets. The clinic partnership. Revised and protected. No public use of Amelia's medical condition. No statements suggesting instability. No claims of mutual timing or joint transition. The garage would remain unnamed in formal documents, but Daniel knew it lived everywhere now. At the end, he asked for 1 minute alone. Amelia said no. His eyes flickered. "You will not even give me that?" She stood carefully, smoothing her scarf. "I gave you 11 years. You used 11 minutes to show me what they meant to you." No one in the room moved. Daniel lowered his eyes first. Outside, Amelia stepped into sunlight so bright it made her blink. Margaret walked beside her without asking if she was all right. Amelia appreciated that. She was not all right. She was also not undone. They walked half a block before Amelia stopped. Her legs shook. Margaret offered an arm. Amelia took it. "I hate that I still feel sad," Amelia said. Margaret looked ahead. "Sadness is not a contract." Amelia let that sentence settle. No, it was not. She could grieve the man she thought she married without returning power to the man who had stood in the garage. That evening, she went home and slept for 11 hours. Chapter 8. The first time Amelia appeared in public after her hair began to thin, the room pretended not to notice with such effort that she nearly laughed. It was a small clinic luncheon, not a gala. Patients, nurses, volunteers, a few donors, and staff gathered in the renovated comfort center to mark the launch of a new transportation fund. Amelia had wanted no ceremony, but Dr. Mercer said people needed moments of good news too. Amelia trusted her. She wore a soft wrap over her head, dark green like the dress from the dinner. Her mother's door-knocker brooch rested at her shoulder. She had considered staying home. Vanity, fatigue, and dread had argued all morning. Then she remembered Daniel's photographer in the lobby and decided her presence did not belong to his memory. The room was warm with soup and conversation. No stage, no giant screen, no award, just tables, chairs, and people who understood that dignity often looks like practical help. Amelia sat near the back at first, but a nurse gently moved a chair to the center table. No speech, just a chair where she belonged. That almost broke her more than applause would have. Halfway through lunch, a woman named Rosa stood to say thank you. She was a patient whose family had used the transportation fund during a difficult month. She did not tell her whole story. She did not perform suffering. She simply said the rides meant her husband could keep working, her children could get to school, and she could stop apologizing for being sick. Amelia looked down at her hands. Stop apologizing for being sick. The phrase entered her like medicine. Daniel had made her feel for one terrible morning that illness was an inconvenience that ruined his timing. Vivian had implied Amelia's pain was dangerous to her pregnancy. Public commentary had asked whether Amelia was brave, bitter, graceful, vengeful, inspiring, fragile. Very few people had asked whether she was tired of apologizing for needing care. After Rosa sat down, Amelia stood. She had not planned to speak. The room quieted anyway. No one here should have to earn kindness by being easy to look at, Amelia said. Her voice wavered once, then strengthened. No one should have to be cheerful to receive help. No one should have to make illness convenient for the people around them. This fund exists because care should arrive before shame does. That was all. She sat down. The applause came gently, not the sharp verdict of the gala, not the stunned noise of scandal. This applause was soft, almost protective. Amelia let it reach her without turning it into armor. After lunch, a young volunteer asked for a photograph with her. Amelia hesitated. Then she said yes, on one condition: no patient in the background without permission. The volunteer immediately turned them toward a plain wall. Amelia smiled. It felt strange, but not false. The photo appeared online later with a caption about the transportation fund. Comments focused on the program. Some mentioned Amelia's strength. A few mentioned Daniel with predictable disgust. Amelia did not read far. She had learned that praise can become another kind of noise if allowed too close. At home, she removed the wrap and stood before the mirror. Her hair looked thinner under the bathroom light. She touched it gently. A tear slipped down her cheek, then another. She did not wipe them quickly. There was no audience. No Vivian. No Daniel. No donor room. Just a woman grieving one more change in a body already carrying too many. Margaret knocked softly, then entered with tea only after Amelia answered. She did not say it will grow back. She did not say you are still beautiful. She only placed the tea down and stood beside her. Sometimes the kindest people know not to rescue you from a moment that deserves to be felt. That night, Amelia opened a blank document. Not a statement, not a foundation plan, a personal letter to herself. She wrote about the garage, the diagnosis, the way Daniel's face looked when he said trapped, the way the elevator doors closed. She wrote about fear, rage, nausea, scarves, soup, donor walls, Vivian's email, Daniel's photographer, Rosa's sentence. She wrote until her hand cramped. At the end, she wrote one line in capital letters, then laughed at herself and changed it back to normal because she did not need shouting even on paper. She was not abandoned because she became ill. She was abandoned because Daniel was the kind of man who left. The difference mattered. It took the blame off her body. Chapter 9. 6 months after the parking garage, Daniel tried one final public reinvention. He announced a new venture focused on resilient leadership during personal crisis. The name was tasteful. The website used soft gray fonts and photographs of Daniel looking out windows. The language was vague enough to hide almost anything. He planned to speak at a private business summit about rebuilding trust after hardship. Amelia heard about it from Margaret, who placed the printed announcement on the study table with the expression of someone setting down something mildly unpleasant. At first, Amelia did not react. Daniel turning his own disgrace into a leadership brand was so predictable it almost felt boring. Then she saw the summit location. The Wren Center, her mother's conference building. The Wren Center was not owned by Amelia personally, but by a community trust chaired by people who still remembered Eleanor Wren walking through construction dust in flat shoes and arguing about wheelchair access. Daniel had secured the booking through an outside organizer who either did not know the history or did not care. The event brochure listed him as a keynote speaker on integrity under pressure. Integrity under pressure. Amelia sat back slowly. There are moments when the universe seems to test whether a woman has truly learned not to laugh at the wrong time. She called Margaret. The correction took 6 hours, not because it was complicated, Because Amelia insisted it be clean. No personal attack, no medical details, no dramatic cancellation post. The Wren Center simply reviewed the booking, discovered the speaker's unresolved conflict with the center's founding values, and withdrew venue approval. The summit could continue elsewhere. Daniel could speak if someone still wanted to listen. He simply could not use Eleanor Wren's name as a backdrop. The organizer panicked and called Amelia directly. She did not answer. Margaret handled it. Daniel called next. Amelia did answer, because this time she wanted to hear the shape of his entitlement. "You cannot keep doing this," he said. She sat in her mother's study, wrapped in a gray cardigan, the afternoon light touching the shelves of old books. Her treatment had entered a steadier phase. She still tired easily, but her voice was stronger. "Doing what?" she asked, blocking every attempt I make to move on. Amelia looked at the door-knocker brooch on the desk. "Moving on is not the same as using my mother's building to sell integrity." He exhaled sharply. "It is a venue." "No. To you, everything is a venue." Silence. "That is your problem," she continued. "The clinic was a venue. My marriage was a venue. My illness was almost a venue until I spoke first. My mother's name will not be one." Daniel's voice dropped. "You are becoming cruel," Amelia almost smiled. "No, Daniel. I am becoming unavailable." She ended the call. The summit moved to a hotel near the airport. Daniel still spoke, but a local columnist mentioned the venue change and asked why a man known for an 11-minute parking garage divorce was selling integrity under pressure. The phrase stuck. Not because Amelia pushed it, because Daniel had built his comeback on a word he had not earned. After that, he faded from Amelia's daily world. Not completely. Divorce papers still moved. Mutual contacts still occasionally delivered unwanted updates. Vivian gave birth quietly and did not contact Amelia again. Daniel posted one photograph holding the baby, face angled away from the camera, captioned, "New Beginnings." Amelia saw it only because someone sent it with outrage on her behalf. She deleted the message without responding. The child was innocent. Daniel's fatherhood would be Daniel's test, not Amelia's burden. As winter returned, Amelia's scans brought cautious good news. Not a miracle, not a movie ending. Progress. Stability. Words that did not sparkle but gave her air. Dr. Mercer smiled when she delivered them, and Amelia cried in the consultation room without embarrassment. Afterward, she went alone to the parking garage. Level B. Row C. Near the elevator. The space where Daniel had asked for divorce was occupied by a red, compact car. Life has a way of being disrespectfully ordinary. Amelia stood near the concrete pillar and listened to the same humming lights, the same distant tires, the same mechanical echo. She waited for the old pain to arrive with full force. It came, but smaller. She saw herself there, beige coat, medical folder, hands shaking. She wanted to step into the memory and stand beside that woman. She wanted to tell her that diagnosis would be frightening, treatment would be hard, betrayal would ache in strange places, and some nights would feel endless. She also wanted to tell her that Daniel leaving would not be the worst thing. The worst thing would have been letting him stay, as the measure of her worth. Amelia touched the concrete pillar lightly. "You got out," she whispered. Then she walked to the elevator. This time, when the doors opened, she did not feel alone. Chapter 10. A year after the diagnosis, Amelia hosted no gala. She refused 3 invitations to be honored, 2 profile requests, and 1 documentary producer who kept using the word inspirational until Margaret ended the call. Amelia did not want her illness turned into a ribbon cutting for other people's emotions. Instead, she organized a breakfast at the clinic. No cameras beyond the foundation photographer. No award, no stage. Patients, caregivers, nurses, drivers, volunteers, and staff were invited to eat pancakes, fruit, eggs, toast, and the kind of coffee that tasted better because someone else made it. The transportation fund had completed its first year. Hundreds of rides, dozens of families, fewer missed appointments, fewer people apologizing for needing help. Amelia arrived early in a blue sweater and the door-knocker brooch. Her hair had begun to return in soft, uneven growth. She touched it less now. Her body still carried fatigue, but it also carried her. That was no longer something she took for granted. Dr. Mercer found her near the donor wall, where Amelia stood looking at her mother's name. The doctor did not ask if she was thinking about the past. She only stood beside her for a moment. That was enough. During breakfast, a little girl spilled orange juice on the floor and burst into tears. Her father looked mortified. A volunteer wiped it up before apology could become shame. Amelia watched and felt something in her chest loosen. This, more than any public takedown, was the world she wanted to fund. One where people made messes because they were human, and care arrived before humiliation. Near the end, Margaret handed her an envelope. Inside was a printed copy of the final divorce decree. Amelia looked at the first page, then closed it. The timing was almost too neat, but life sometimes offers clean lines after long disorder. Daniel Rowe was no longer her husband. She felt sadness first. That surprised her less now. Sadness did not mean regret. It meant something had once mattered. She allowed it. Then came relief, quiet and deep. Not the bright thrill of revenge. The steadier peace of a door closing without anyone on the wrong side still holding her name. Margaret watched her face. "Do you want a minute?" Amelia looked around the room, a nurse laughing, a patient buttering toast, a volunteer refilling coffee, Dr. Mercer carrying a plate to an older man. Life everywhere, ordinary and stubborn. "No," Amelia said. "I want pancakes." Margaret smiled. After breakfast, Amelia made one short announcement. She thanked everyone for building a year of care that did not depend on one man's image. She did not name Daniel. She thanked drivers, nurses, volunteers, donors, and families who trusted the clinic on hard days. Then she looked at the donor wall and spoke more softly. "My mother believed compassion was not what we said under lights. It was what remained when nobody was watching. This year, you proved her right." That was all. The applause was warm, unpolished, full of forks still in hands and napkins on laps. Amelia laughed, embarrassed and moved. Later, she walked outside alone. The day was cold, but the sky was clear. She crossed the hospital courtyard and stood near a row of bare trees. Her phone buzzed once. A message from an unfamiliar number. It was Daniel. "I heard the divorce is final. I hope you are well." Amelia read the sentence. Once, those 5 words would have pulled 100 feelings from her. Did he mean it? Was he lonely? Did he regret it? Was he trying to reopen something? Should she answer kindly? Should she answer sharply? Now the questions passed like birds overhead. She did not reply. She slipped the phone into her coat pocket and walked toward the parking structure. Her car was on level B. Not the same row. Close enough. At the elevator, a woman stood holding a medical folder with both hands. Her face was pale. Beside her, an older sister or friend held a tote bag and said nothing, simply standing close. Amelia recognized the shape of the moment. Not the details, the shape. The elevator opened. The woman hesitated. Amelia stepped back and held the door. No speech. No advice. No story about survival forced into a stranger's fear. Just a hand holding the door so someone with shaking knees did not have to hurry. The woman looked at her, grateful, without knowing why. Amelia nodded and let the doors close after them. In the garage, the lights still hummed. Cars moved. Shoes echoed. Somewhere, someone laughed. Somewhere, someone cried. The place had not changed. Amelia had. She reached her car, sat behind the wheel, and rested both hands there for a moment before starting the engine. Daniel had thought leaving her 11 minutes after diagnosis would free him from guilt. Instead, it freed Amelia from the last illusion that love was proven by how much abandonment she could survive quietly. She drove out of the garage into clean winter light. Chapter 11. 2 years later, Amelia returned to the Hope in Motion dinner, not because she missed ballrooms, awards, or long speeches about courage. She returned because the clinic's transportation fund had doubled. The patient rooms had expanded, and Dr. Mercer had convinced her that refusing every public room forever still gave Daniel's memory too much control. The ballroom was the same glass space above the river. Gold lights, white tables, flowers arranged too tall for easy conversation. A large screen waited behind the stage. Amelia stood at the entrance for a moment and felt the old scene pass through her. Daniel at the podium, Vivian at the table, her own hand on the chair as she said the patients would not lose care because someone confused compassion with branding. The memory no longer made her shake. It made her straighten her brooch. She wore a dark red dress this time, simple and warm against her skin. Her hair, shorter now, curled softly at her jaw. The door-knocker brooch gleamed near her shoulder. People turned when she entered, but not with the predatory curiosity that follows fresh scandal. This was recognition of a different kind. The room had learned who built the doors. Her name card sat at the central table. Not beside Daniel. Daniel was not there. His world had moved elsewhere, smaller and louder in places Amelia did not visit. Vivian was not there either. Their absence felt less like victory than weather clearing. The dinner began. Amelia listened to speakers, ate enough to please Margaret, and watched a new film about the clinic. This time, the footage centered patients only where they had chosen to be seen, staff doing practical work, drivers helping people into vans, volunteers folding blankets, children coloring in waiting rooms. Amelia appeared for 3 seconds, carrying a box of scarves into the comfort center, laughing because one had fallen over her face. The room laughed with her. Then Dr. Mercer took the stage. She did not tell Amelia's medical story. She did not reduce her to a diagnosis. She spoke about systems of care, about quiet money doing loud good, about the difference between a program built for photographs and a program built for Wednesday afternoons when someone cannot afford a ride. At the end, she invited Amelia to stand, not to receive an award, but to accept a framed copy of the first year's patient notes from the Transportation Fund. Names removed. Words preserved. Thank you for getting me there. Thank you for not making me ask twice. Thank you for the blanket. Thank you for treating my mother like she mattered. Amelia stood with the frame in her hands and felt the room blur. She had spent so long being praised for grace, elegance, silence, strength. These notes praised something better, usefulness. When she spoke, her voice was steady. There was a morning when I thought a diagnosis had made me smaller, she said. Then someone else's cruelty tried to make me feel disposable. I was wrong about both. Illness did not make me smaller. Betrayal did not make me disposable. They only showed me where my life needed stronger doors. The ballroom was very still. If this work means anything, I hope it means no person in fear has to wonder whether they are still worth kindness. She stopped there. No dramatic ending. No raised fist. No mention of Daniel. No need. The applause rose slowly, then filled the glass room. Amelia accepted it differently now. Not as proof she had won. Not as payment for suffering. As sound moving through a room that once held her humiliation and now held her voice without asking her to shrink. After dinner, she stepped onto the terrace. The river reflected the city in broken gold. Margaret joined her with 2 cups of tea. They stood side by side, not speaking for a while. Your mother would have liked tonight, Margaret said. Amelia smiled. She would have complained about the flowers blocking people's faces. Margaret laughed softly. She would. Below them, cars moved along the wet streets. Somewhere beyond the river was the hospital garage, the elevator, the pillar, the old version of herself holding a folder and trying not to fall apart. Amelia no longer wished that morning had never happened. She wished she had never been hurt, yes. She wished Daniel had been better, yes. She wished cancer had never entered her life, of course. But wishing could not rebuild the past. What she had built instead was imperfect, practical, alive. A transportation fund, a comfort center, a home with locked doors that opened only by her choice, a body she no longer blamed for another person's abandonment, a life where grief and joy could sit in the same room without one proving the other false. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Mercer. Good speech. Also, eat the dessert before Margaret gives it away. Amelia laughed and showed Margaret, who looked guilty enough to confirm the threat was real. They went back inside. At the central table, Amelia's dessert waited untouched. A small chocolate tart with gold leaf, too elaborate and exactly the kind of thing her mother would have called silly before eating every bite. Amelia sat down, picked up her fork, and let herself enjoy it. That was a victory, too. Chapter 12. On the 3rd anniversary of her diagnosis, Amelia went to the clinic before sunrise. No ceremony was scheduled. No one expected her. She liked it that way. The comfort center was quiet in the blue hour before appointments filled the halls. A cleaner moved gently through the waiting area. The tea station was stocked. Blankets rested in a warm cabinet. The donor wall caught the first pale light through the lobby windows, her mother's name shining softly but not shouting. Amelia stood before it with her hands in the pockets of her coat. Her health was not a simple fairy tale. There had been setbacks, scares, follow-ups, days when good news had an asterisk, days when fear returned because a phone rang at the wrong hour. But she was here, breathing, working, laughing sometimes without checking whether she had earned it. That was enough to honor. She walked down to the parking garage alone. Level B was colder than the lobby. The lights hummed. A maintenance cart sat near the elevator. Someone had painted new arrows on the concrete since the day Daniel left. The pillar was the same. Amelia stopped beside it and removed one small thing from her pocket, a copy of the old parking validation ticket from the day of her diagnosis. She had found it in the medical folder months later and kept it without knowing why. The paper had faded. She looked at it for a moment, then tore it in half. Not dramatically, just once, cleanly. Then again. She placed the pieces in the trash near the elevator, not because she wanted to erase the day, because proof was no longer the same as possession. She had enough record, enough memory, enough boundaries. She did not need to carry a parking ticket like a relic. The elevator doors opened. Margaret stood inside holding 2 coffees. Amelia stared at her. "Did you follow me?" "No," Margaret said, entirely unconvincing. "I anticipated your sentimental recklessness." Amelia laughed so hard the sound echoed against the concrete. They rode up together. In the lobby, the day had begun. Patients checked in. Phones rang. A child complained about itchy socks. A nurse smiled at someone who looked afraid. Life, uncurated and stubborn, filled the building. At the Comfort Center entrance, Amelia paused to read the small plaque installed the year before. It did not carry Daniel's name. It did not even carry Amelia's in large letters. It said, "Care is what remains when performance ends. Eleanor Wren Foundation." Amelia touched the edge of the plaque. Daniel had asked for divorce 11 minutes after her cancer diagnosis because he thought illness made her a burden and timing made him clever. He had been wrong on both counts. Illness had not made Amelia less worthy of love. It had simply revealed who understood love only as long as it was convenient. His timing had not freed him from guilt. It had preserved the truth so sharply that no polished statement could dull it. For a long time, people told Amelia she had exposed him. That was only partly true. Daniel exposed himself in the garage. Amelia merely stopped covering the lights. She spent the morning in the Comfort Center, not as a symbol, but as a useful person. She refilled tea. She carried blankets. She sat with a woman waiting for her sister's appointment and spoke about ordinary things: weather, soup, bad parking, comfortable shoes. When the woman began to cry without warning, Amelia handed her tissues and did not tell her to be brave. Bravery, Amelia had learned, is often what people call you when they do not want to make room for your fear. At noon, she returned to the brownstone. The house was warm, full of books, sunlight, and the kind of silence that belonged to her. In the study, she opened the old folder labeled Public Boundaries. Inside were statements, timelines, emails, voicemails, and the first draft she had written the day Daniel stood in the rain outside her door. She read only the first page. Then she closed the folder and placed it in the archive box. On her desk sat a new folder, Patient Lodging Project. Amelia smiled. There was always another door to build. That evening, she walked through the neighborhood alone. The sky turned violet above the brownstones. A couple pushed a stroller past her. Someone played piano badly from an upstairs window. At the corner, she stopped at a small bakery and bought a slice of lemon cake because she wanted it, not because she was celebrating survival in a cinematic way, but because ordinary desire had become precious. Back home, she ate the cake at the kitchen counter. Her phone remained quiet. No Daniel, no Vivian, no narrative to control. No room where she had to sit beside a man who confused her silence with permission. Just Amelia, her mother's house, her own breath, and the deep knowledge that life after betrayal is not proven by becoming untouched. It is proven by becoming unreachable to the version of love that once asked you to abandon yourself. The diagnosis had frightened her. The divorce had shattered her. But neither had ended her. Amelia Rowe, who had once stood in a parking garage with medical papers in her hand while her husband chose another life, now opened her own door, stepped into her own warm kitchen, and lived. Chapter 13. Vivian returned to Amelia's life through a photograph. Not directly. Not with courage. The picture appeared first on a small lifestyle account that specialized in soft lighting, nursery colors, and expensive versions of vulnerability. Vivian sat beside a window holding Daniel's baby, her hair loose, face bare, a white blanket draped over her shoulder. The caption spoke of surviving public judgment, protecting new life, and learning that women should not tear other women down when men make mistakes. Amelia saw it because 3 people sent it to Margaret, and Margaret, with visible reluctance, brought it to the study. "You do not have to look," Margaret said. Amelia looked anyway. The baby was beautiful. That was the first truth. Round cheek, tiny fist, dark hair. Innocence has a way of entering ugly stories without asking permission. Amelia felt no anger toward the child. None. That clarity mattered to her. Then she read Vivian's caption again. "Men make mistakes. Women should not tear other women down." It was a clever sentence if no one remembered the parking garage, the email, the pregnant hand at the central table, the message asking Amelia not to punish an innocent baby while Amelia was learning how to live inside a frightened body. Vivian had found a softer costume. Not mistress now. Mother. Not participant. Survivor. Not cruel. Misled. The internet, hungry for redemption arcs with pretty windows, began to soften around her. Amelia closed the tablet. No. Margaret lifted one eyebrow. No? No? No performance using that child. She did not want to attack Vivian. She did not want a public fight with a woman holding a newborn. She especially did not want the baby dragged into the ugly center. But Vivian's post did not merely ask for compassion. It rewrote harm into sisterhood and placed Amelia in the role of the woman who tore another woman down. That lie would not stand near her name. Amelia wrote a response herself. She kept it short. Women do not owe silence to other women who help harm them. Children are innocent. Adults are accountable. I wish every child safety and every adult the courage to tell the truth without hiding behind a child. She did not tag Vivian. She did not name Daniel. She posted it through her personal account, which she rarely used. The sentence traveled faster than she expected because it gave language to something many women understood. Compassion for a child does not require erasing the choices of the adults holding that child. Vivian deleted her caption, but not the photograph. Then, Daniel called. Amelia did not answer. He sent one message. "You have no idea what it is like to be responsible for a baby while people judge you." Amelia sat very still. She thought of the woman in the clinic lobby whose husband worked nights so she could attend treatment. She thought of Rosa apologizing for needing rides. She thought of mothers in waiting rooms measuring fear against grocery money. She thought of all the people Daniel had used as scenery while speaking about burdens he had never carried. She also thought of herself, childless not by choice at first, then by medical caution, then by the strange rearrangement of her future after diagnosis. Daniel's message tried to use parenthood as a crown and a shield at once. She typed no answer. Instead, she sent the message to her attorney and to Margaret. The next morning, Vivian posted a shorter statement. This one had no window, no blanket, no soft focus. She admitted she had entered a relationship with Daniel while he was married. She admitted she knew Amelia was still his wife. She admitted she had asked Amelia for compassion while failing to show it. She did not mention the baby except to say the child deserved privacy. It was not perfect. It did not need to be. It was the first time Vivian's public words did not ask Amelia to carry the weight of Vivian's image. Amelia read it once. Then she turned off the phone and went to her appointment. That afternoon, while waiting for blood work, she sat beside a woman wearing a red scarf. The woman recognized her, hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you for saying adults are accountable." Amelia looked at her. The woman twisted the edge of her scarf. "My sister keeps telling me to forgive someone because he has children, but he hurt me before he became a father." Amelia felt the sentence settle between them, heavy and familiar. "A child can deserve kindness," Amelia said, "without becoming a shield for the person who caused harm." The woman nodded. She looked relieved, as if someone had unlocked a small room in her chest. Amelia leaned back in the chair. Her body was tired. Her arm hurt. The waiting room television played a weather report nobody watched. She did not feel like a symbol. She felt like a patient saying one useful thing to another patient under bad fluorescent lighting. That was enough. For the first time, Vivian's existence no longer felt like a blade. She had become part of the record, not the center of the wound. Daniel had chosen. Vivian had chosen. Amelia had survived the choices without agreeing to carry their excuses. When her name was called, Amelia stood and walked toward the nurse. The red scarf woman gave her a small smile. Amelia smiled back. Chapter 14. Daniel's final attempt to reclaim dignity came wrapped in fatherhood. He announced a charitable initiative for children of patients, a small program attached to his new consulting work. The name was sentimental. The promotional photograph showed him holding his baby against his chest, eyes closed as if listening to a sacred truth. The caption spoke about becoming a father and understanding care on a deeper level. Amelia saw the announcement on a Monday morning while reviewing plans for the patient lodging project. For a moment, she simply stared at the screen. Daniel had avoided the daily work of sick adults when it threatened his comfort. Now he wanted to build a public identity around children near illness because fatherhood gave him warmer lighting. The program itself was not the problem. Children of patients did need support. Amelia knew that. The problem was Daniel's timing, funding, and language. The initiative borrowed phrases almost directly from foundation materials Amelia's team had developed months earlier. It used a photograph taken in the clinic hallway before his access was revoked, cropped to remove the donor wall but not enough to hide the distinctive blue chairs Amelia had chosen. That was the mistake. The blue chairs. They were custom, selected by Eleanor Wren years before because the arms were low enough for weak patients to rise without pain. Amelia knew every curve of them. Daniel had cropped out the foundation name, but the room still gave him away. This time, Amelia did not make a public statement first. She sent one private notice through the proper channel. Remove the clinic image. Remove copied language. Do not imply connection to Eleanor Wren Foundation or its patient programs. Daniel ignored it for 6 hours. Then the campaign page expanded. Amelia almost admired the stubbornness. He still believed that if he moved quickly and looked tender enough, correction would seem cruel. The foundation responded with a side-by-side comparison. On the left, Daniel's campaign image with the blue chairs. On the right, the clinic comfort room, funded by Eleanor Wren Foundation, photographed 2 years before. Below, one sentence. Care for children should not begin with borrowed rooms and copied words. The post was devastating because it was simple. People did not need to understand grants, permissions, or brand usage. They understood a man using a room he had lost access to. They understood borrowed compassion. They understood a father holding a baby while recycling the work of the wife he had abandoned. The backlash was immediate, but different from the first scandal. Less shock, more exhaustion. Daniel was no longer surprising people. He was confirming them. A commentator wrote, "At some point, a man stops making mistakes and starts revealing habits." That line followed him everywhere. Daniel called Margaret, not Amelia, progress, perhaps, or cowardice. Margaret did not relay the whole conversation. She only said Daniel sounded angry and afraid. Amelia felt no satisfaction. Fear had made him cruel before. She had no desire to watch him become cruel near his child. So she did something he did not expect. She offered, through formal channels, to fund a separate child support program at the clinic under independent management. No Daniel. No Amelia as public face. No campaign photograph. No glossy fatherhood language. Just art supplies, counseling referrals, meal vouchers, quiet corners, and transportation for families where children were living beside a parent's illness. The program launched 2 months later. It was called the Waiting Room Project. The name came from a little boy who told a nurse that waiting rooms were where time got stuck. Amelia heard the story and approved the name instantly. That was the kind of truth no branding consultant could improve. At the first supply delivery, Amelia carried a box of crayons into a newly painted room near the clinic lobby. A child sat at a low table drawing a person with very long arms. The mother beside him wore a hospital bracelet and looked too tired to smile fully. The boy glanced at Amelia's scarf and asked if she was a doctor. No, Amelia said. I am someone who brings crayons. He considered that. That's good. She laughed. I think so too. Later, a nurse told her Daniel's campaign had quietly disappeared. The website now redirected to a generic consulting page. His fatherhood photograph remained on his personal account, but without any charity language. For once, he had retreated before the lie could become larger than the correction. Amelia drove home through light rain. At a red light, she thought about Daniel's baby again. Somewhere, that child would one day grow old enough to understand fragments of the story. Amelia hoped the child would find adults willing to tell truth without using it as a weapon. She hoped Daniel would become better in private than he had been in public. Hope, she had learned, did not require trust. It could exist at a distance, with locked doors. That night, she opened the lodging project folder and added a new note. Include sibling rooms. Illness did not happen to one body only. It moved through families, schedules, kitchens, school pickups, bedtime stories, and the small hearts of children who knew something was wrong before anyone explained it well. Daniel had tried to turn that reality into a comeback. Amelia would turn it into rooms. The difference, as always, was whether people were being helped or displayed. Chapter 15. The patient lodging project opened 18 months later in a renovated brick building 2 blocks from the hospital. Amelia named it Wren House, not after herself, not after the scandal, but after her mother, who had believed shelter was the most practical form of tenderness. The building had 12 rooms, a shared kitchen, laundry, a quiet room, a children's corner, and a small garden with benches wide enough for someone to sit beside a person who had no words. Every room had warm lamps instead of harsh overhead lights. Every door opened with a simple card. Every welcome packet began with the same sentence. You do not have to earn rest here. Amelia approved that line personally. The opening was small. No gala, though donors had asked. No ribbon cutting with oversized scissors. Instead, the first families arrived throughout the day. A grandmother with 2 tote bags. A father carrying a sleeping child. A young woman beginning treatment who came with her sister and a plant wrapped in newspaper. Staff greeted each one by name. Amelia stood in the kitchen filling a glass pitcher with water and lemon slices. The task steadied her. Useful hands made emotional days easier. Margaret watched from the doorway. You know we hired people for that. Then they can admire my lemons. Margaret smiled and said nothing. Dr. Mercer arrived at noon with a box of books for the children's corner. She found Amelia in the hallway, looking at the welcome sentence printed on the wall. Good line, the doctor said. Amelia nodded. Hard-learned. The first night Wren House filled, Amelia stayed late, not in a dramatic way. She signed forms, adjusted a lamp, carried extra towels, and helped a volunteer find more tea. At 9, she stepped into the garden. The hospital lights glowed down the street. Cars moved through wet pavement. Somewhere nearby, an ambulance siren rose and faded. Her phone buzzed with a message from Margaret, though Margaret was only inside. Do not stay until midnight pretending towels are destiny. Amelia laughed and texted back, fine. Before leaving, she walked through the quiet room. A woman sat alone on the sofa, head bowed, hands clasped around a paper cup. Amelia did not know whether she was a patient or caregiver. It did not matter. She placed a blanket on the armrest nearby, close enough to reach, far enough not to intrude. The woman looked up and nodded once. No speech, no inspirational moment, just warmth placed within reach. That was the life Amelia had built from the morning Daniel tried to discard her. On the way home, she drove past the hospital parking garage. For the first time, she did not look toward the entrance. The garage existed. The memory existed. But it no longer pulled her eyes like a bruise. At the brownstone, she unlocked her door and stepped inside. The house smelled of books and rain. Her mother's umbrella still stood by the entrance. The blue scarf hung over a chair. On the table was a slice of lemon cake Margaret had left, covered with a note that said, Eat before becoming noble. Amelia ate it standing in the kitchen. Afterward, she opened the old archive box. Public boundaries, legal papers, statements, Vivian's email, Daniel's messages, the first clinic correction, the canceled Wren Center notice, the final divorce decree. Each piece had once felt hot enough to burn her fingers. Now they were paper. She added one last item, the welcome packet from Wren House. Then she closed the box. Not to hide it, to finish arranging it. Upstairs, Amelia changed into soft clothes and removed her brooch. She placed it on the dresser beside her mother's photograph. In the picture, Eleanor Wren looked amused, as if she had always known her daughter would take a terrible door and build 12 better ones. Amelia touched the frame. "We did all right," she said. The house answered with silence, warm and familiar. That night, rain tapped against the windows. Amelia slept deeply, not because life was perfect, not because fear never returned, and not because betrayal had become meaningful enough to excuse. She slept because her body was tired from living, not from defending the man who had left. She slept because tomorrow there would be rooms where people could rest without asking permission. She slept because the version of her abandoned in the garage had not vanished. She had been carried, protected, and finally brought home. In the morning, Amelia woke to sunlight across the floor. For a long time, she lay still and listened to the quiet. Then she got up, opened her own door, and began another day that belonged to her. Subscribe for more stories about quiet women, hidden power, and the moment betrayal meets consequences.